Okay, welcome everybody. Just as people are logging in here, we'd like to get started and introduce what we'll be discussing today. We're really excited about the subject matter that Brad will be covering with us. There are really a lot of possibilities with Power BI, and there's been a lot of interest in this subject. That's why we've decided to do the webinar on Power BI today. So without further ado, let's introduce Brad. Brad works for ZAACT as a senior consultant in Microsoft SharePoint and Business Intelligence. He has a passion for using data and analytics to solve real-world problems. He has several Microsoft certifications from SharePoint to SQL Server, including the MCSE Business Intelligence, and he has presented at user groups and SharePoint Saturdays. He loves interacting with the great minds throughout the communities. And as we go here, we chose the webinar format so that you could ask questions, and this could be an interactive session. So feel free to use the Q&A block in the Cisco WebEx console, and we'll be monitoring those and passing those questions to Brad to answer as he goes along. If your question goes unanswered, you may get a response back in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and also we'll have a Q&A section hopefully at the end if we still have time. So with that, I'll pass it on to Brad.
Thank you, Todd. All right, so just in case anybody, if you're there, we do have a dial-in code if you want to pass it to anybody else. If they're sitting with you, we have an access code. We are excited to be here, and we are excited to talk about Power BI today. Just a really quick contact information about ZAACT. If you're interested in what we can offer for you, we're a Microsoft partner in collaboration and content, and we offer services ranging from Exchange to Azure, SQL Server, SharePoint development, and custom apps. So if you have an interest at all in what we can do for you, please give us a shout out. Come visit our website, visit us on social media. If you'd like to contact me, I am always interested in hearing from the community, hearing what projects you have to work on. If you have any questions after this webinar, here's my email address. Again, our website at ZAACT. And then if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, there's my link right there. So without waiting anymore, let's dive into this. So we like to have a purpose, and I like everybody to know what we're going to do today. The whole purpose behind this webinar is to kind of showcase all the features and the capabilities of Power BI and how you can use it to manage all your tasks and projects. Because Power BI has so many capabilities built into it, and especially where it was built from using data modeling in Power Pivot and using DAX, which many people are familiar with SQL Server analysis services. There's just so much you can do, and we want to showcase some of those capabilities and features. So kind of an overview of what we're going to do today. I know there are several people on this call that are a little unfamiliar with Power BI, so we're going to do a quick little overview about some of the features. We're going to talk about PowerBI.com, showcase Power BI Desktop. Then after that, we're going to dive into the Project Server Content Pack, and I'll talk a little bit more about content packs in a bit. And then after that, we're going to dive into the Project Server API, pulling in SharePoint tasks and also SharePoint search. And we're going to show how you can use Power BI in all these scenarios to better utilize and manage your projects. So with that, let's take a little bit of a tour around what is Power BI for those of you who are new to Power BI or aren't familiar with it. I know there are a few of you on the call, so let's just talk a little bit about what Power BI is and what it offers you. There are pretty much three different types of tools, three different types of options when it comes to Power BI. You have PowerBI.com, which is both free and it has a pro version, and there's a link here for the pricing. And we will make these slides available to you, just so you know, after this webinar is over. So if you want to hang on to these links, you can access them after. We have the free and pro version, and with pro, you can there's about 10 gigabytes of storage, and then there's a limit on how much data you can pull up into Power BI, but that's all available there under pricing. There's the Power BI Desktop, which is actually a free application. If you're familiar with using Excel and Power Query and Power Pivot, you would be, it's very easy to transition over to Power BI Desktop. And we're going to walk through Power BI Desktop here in a little bit. But it's actually a free download, so if you wanted to, just go out to powerbi.com, and under their products, there is a link that you can download it and try it out for yourself for free without a license. So powerbi.com, you have to have a license for. Power BI Desktop is where you build your reports, and we're going to walk through each of these. And then you also have the mobile app, which can be downloaded from the Windows Store, from the Apple App Store, or from Google Play, obviously. So that's just a little bit about what is Power BI. And what I want to do here is I want to spend most of my time actually demoing what Power BI is. What we're going to do is kind of transition away from here, and we're going to go up onto powerbi.com. Just so that we can walk through some of the features for those of you who are new, and then we can showcase some of the other pieces that actually have to do with project management and task management. So once you go to powerbi.com and you create your account and you log in and you have a license, you're immediately taken to your dashboard. And from your dashboard, you can see here on the left-hand side, I have my dashboards, I have reports, and I have data sets. So just to give you a quick overview, not to go into too much detail, a data set is just that. It's your data that you're connecting to. It connects to one report, and then a dashboard can have many reports that are showcased within that dashboard. So as you build up, they all inherit from each other. You can drill down back into them. So for example, over here on this dashboard from this demo, if I click into it, it will show me that value that I have from the dashboard. Also over here on the left, I have the ability to get data. Now this is really where a lot of the flexibility of Power BI comes into play, is I can get any type of data from Excel to Power BI desktop files, CSV files. I can connect to my OneDrive. I can connect to Azure, and I can connect to content packs, and I can also have the ability to publish my own content packs for my organization. This is a really powerful feature because, so for example, I have an example content pack here that I've already created, but a content pack can be shared with anybody in your organization. So for example, I have a group that was created called ZAACT Power BI, and I can share that with that group. So if you're familiar with Office 365 groups, oh yeah, thanks. Thank you, Todd. So we have several questions that are coming in here. So if you want, just to kind of throw this out there, if you have questions as we're going along, there will be a Q&A at the end. But if you do have questions, feel free to type them in as we're going, and if they need to be answered right away, I can do that. But yeah, so one of the questions that just came in is there a way that I can publish my reports to my blogs from here? So here I have a report, for example, and somebody asked if there was a way that if I could publish that to my blog, and there is a way. So under here, under settings, I have this ability to manage embedded codes. And these are actually links to where I have published my my reports from. So if I was to open this back up here and go to Publish to Web, it creates an embed code. And this embed code is what you then use to publish it to your blog or to your public website. And this is another feature of Power BI, and you can manage those embed codes up here in the top. So thank you for that question. Yes, you can publish your own reports up to your public websites. So under my Get Data, let me just jump back here to Content Packs. I want to talk about Content Packs for just a minute because we're going to dive into the Project Server Content Pack. And so it's pretty important that we talk about this first so that we're all on the same page. With my Content Pack, I can publish any number of dashboards with reports and data sets. And basically what this does is, for my data sets and reports and dashboards, it gives the people that I'm publishing this to a starting point. So it gives them a data set, a set of reports, a dashboard that could be already pre-filtered to their team, could already be filtered to their department, or it could just be a data set that has to do with an area that they focus on, and they can have a report and a dashboard giving them something to start with to see how to interact with that data, and then they can use that data set within their content pack to create their own reports if they really wanted to. So content packs are a very powerful thing, and I really like what Power BI has done with content packs. So let me come back here. What we're going to do now, let me just move this, is I just want to talk about one more thing, and that's gateways. So within, to access your data, let's come back here to get data. In my organization, whoops. I can actually create gateways, and gateways can be a personal gateway, they can be an enterprise gateway. And what this means is, oh, I don't have any gateways installed. A personal gateway is an application that I install on my local laptop that is just what the word gateway implies. It allows me to connect my data up to Power BI and synchronize the data between the two. It allows access, a gateway between my data source and Power BI. I can install a personal gateway on my local laptop, or we can have enterprise gateways that they install on their on your local server. So you could have your enterprise, your company that you're working for, they can install an enterprise gateway and have different connections to different databases and data sources. And that's really an overview about what is Power BI and how to use it. It's very simple in that you have your reports, your dashboards, your data sets, and you get your data and bring it in. They have so many different data sources you can choose from. So with that, I'd like to now focus on talking about the project server content pack. So the purpose of this webinar is to talk about how I can manage my tasks and my projects better within Power BI. Well, Microsoft has created for us, first thing that I always like to start with, what can I do out of the box? So Microsoft has already created for us under content packs here, a project server online content pack. So this is, again, for Project Server Online. So if you are using SharePoint 2013 on-premise, I'm going to show you how you can access the API for Project Server on-prem. But for the content pack specifically in Power BI, this is for Project Online. But you can connect directly to your Project Online site. If I just click on Connect here, it will open up a window. I can type in my PWA site collection here. I've already gone ahead and did this so that it wouldn't be too slow, because sometimes importing in data can be a little slow. And this is what it gives you. It gives you a dashboard called Microsoft Project. It gives you a report called Microsoft Project, and you can rename this, and it gives you a data set called Microsoft Project. So what this is doing is, again, going back to the idea of content packs, is we have a landing spot, or somewhere for us to start with, is we have a report, we have our data sets, and we have our dashboard. So what does the dashboard even give me? Well, if I look through here, I have all my overdue milestones and upcoming milestones. I have my remaining work and actual work. I have a little bit of a burn down here. I have over here some projects that have been updated, some active issues, active risks that are open and closed. So you see that Microsoft has given us a bunch of metrics already on our dashboard. And if I drill into my project, onto the report, this one doesn't happen to have any data with issues and risks, but it would show me issues. I have the status of my portfolio, my project's compliance, and the risks and different metrics that are associated with it. So what Microsoft has done is they've already given us a good starting point for our reports and a dashboard with it. But let's say that I wanted to, and actually, if I wanted to come back up here to my dashboard, there is Power Q&A. I'm not sure if anybody here has used Power Q&A, but what it basically stands for is question and answer. You can actually ask a question to it. So like if I want to say actual work by project, it would pull up a chart for me that I could then pin to my dashboard. I can change that visualization over here on the right-hand side. I can add or remove any number of fields to this visualization, and it can also be pinned. Okay, so there is a whole bunch of options already out of the box from Microsoft on how to use Power BI and how to report off of their data in Project Server. But I want to talk about, for just a minute, so there's a couple of questions here. I'll address those in just a minute when we get to Power BI Desktop. So here on my data set, what we're going to do is see what I can build actually just out of the box using the Microsoft Project connection from their content pack. So here under, it was to select my Microsoft Project. There it is. It refreshed. Okay, so you see here we have our assignment time phase data set, our baseline data set. So for those of you who are familiar with Project Server, this gives me my baseline and my time over with a comparison here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my actual work. In my task, let's just say I wanted to compare my actual work to my work by project, for example. So using the out-of-the-box, I clicked on Project ID, using the out-of-the-box data set from Microsoft Project, I'm able to come in here and do several things already with just their data set that they've given me. And if you look here, the sigma symbol here, this means that it's aggregate. So what that means is when I select on work, I have the ability to do the sum, the average, minimum, maximum count, anything like that that is an aggregate function I can do with my with any of these values that are shown here. These calculator symbols down here are measures, and we're going to talk about measures here in a minute when we dive into Project Server. But here, just from the database, the data set that they've given me, from tasks to risks to projects, I can create any number of charts that have to do with my projects. So this is good, and I like what Microsoft has given us just out of the box with their content packs. I kind of like being able to write my own measures. I'm somebody who likes to use ZAACT, and I like to interact with my data set, maybe write my own calculations. So how could I do that myself without having to, you know, wonder if these calculations are performing against what my business process defines? So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull up Power BI Desktop. Okay, so here is the Power BI Desktop, and if you'll notice that this looks a lot like the dataset view that I was just sitting on in PowerBI.com. And this dataset view, I have the ability to go out and get data, and using, if you're familiar with Power Pivot, from Excel, this is pretty similar in that I have my data set view, I have my relationship view, that I can define my relationships. And we're going to come back here and create some calculated columns and some measures. But what do I really want to do? What I want to do is show you how we can connect to the Project Server data. Okay, so if I go under Get Data, for example, if we were to scroll down through here, you'll notice that, I'll just kind of scroll slow, there's a whole bunch of data sources that we have access to, and we're going to talk about a SharePoint list here in a little bit. But Project Server is actually not listed. But that's okay, because Microsoft has made the Project Server API as a RESTful service. And so all I have to do is connect to it using an OData feed. So One of the features and capabilities that I really want to showcase here today in Power BI is the ability to connect to any RESTful service using an OData feed. And we're going to look at several different options for this, but by connecting to this OData, we're able to, without even connecting to a database, we can pull in any type of JSON object, XML, or anything like that that is available to us. And that's what Project Server allows us to do. So if I click on Connect to OData Feed, okay. So the piece of this that is the most important is the last section here. So we have _API project data. So this is my PWA site that is hosted online. Now this actually can be done on a SharePoint 2013 on-prem environment as well. So if you have Project Server on-premise and you wanted to connect to your project data, so let's say I wanted to download Power BI Desktop and start playing with my project data, you can actually do that, without having to publish it to powerbi.com. You could do that, and it would allow you to create any number of reports and dashboards. You just wouldn't be able to publish them because you wouldn't have powerbi.com. But you could connect here, or if you want to do this in Excel, you could actually do this in Excel today using Power Query. But the key here is the _API project data. And since I've already connected and we don't want to go through the slow connection process, I'm going to edit my query. When I connected to there, I was able to select which lists I wanted to pull in. Okay, so all it does is it brings up a list of data sets that you can pull in that are lists, and you can select which fields you want to pull in, which columns, and then it'll load it into this query window. So this is my query editor. For those of you who may be familiar with Power Query, this is exactly that. This is Power Query, and it uses the same M language. If you're familiar with it in Excel, it's the same engine here. So let's take a look at this. I want to do a couple of things here. First of all, I want to see if I can filter using Power Query. I want to filter tasks that are, let's say 90 days or older. How would I do that? So if I wanted to start with that, I could come here and under my filters, I could do a date time filter, and I could do anything after a certain day. So if I wanted to select a time, I could say anything that is after 90 days from now, and that would get me started, and I could start filtering down these tasks using Power Query. What I've done also, just to showcase what you can do with Power Query, is, let me come back here. I can actually filter it down to the last 90 days, or I could filter it to the most recent as of today. The other thing that I can do, okay, if I come back here to my, there we go. So here, sorry about all the clicking there, I had to find it. So in my time by day, so I'm filtering this date field using the M language of Power Query. I'm able to filter it down to the next 90 days. Anything that was created in the last 90 days, that has a time by day of the last 90 days, I'm able to filter down this data set. So that way, for those of you with large implementations of Project Server, you can actually filter this down so you're not having to pull in all of your data from all your data sets across all the years that you've been tracking it. Okay, so this is a way you can do it for the last 90 days. Another thing that I can do, go back here, I can also filter it to specific projects. So in this case, what I've done is I've gone in and just said, I just want to do all these projects that I'm going to use for my Power BI demo. You could filter it to any number of projects. If you're building this as a data set for a specific team and you wanted to filter it for the project that had to do with their team, you could do that and then publish this up as a content pack into powerbi.com. Okay, so what we've done here is we've filtered this down to tasks that are 90 days or older. I've also filtered it down to my projects that I want to see. So now I'm going to save this, close it, and apply it. Now what I can do is I can create some measures. So let's talk for just a minute about what is a measure, what is DAX. So in this process of Power BI Desktop, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? Well, first we're trying to get our data. And so we've done that using get data, enter our queries, and we've used Power Query to bring in our data. We've done some filtering, maybe some transformations on there. So for example, well, we're going to do some more transformations when we get to SharePoint. We'll talk about some of the options there. I get my data, I bring it in, do some transformations, some filtering, maybe add some new columns or take away some things. And then once I bring it in out of Power Query, I can then model it. And this is similar to what you would do in Power Pivot using DAX. So I have my data view, and under my data view, over here on the right-hand side, I have all my data sets that I'm pulling in. So I have my task baseline, assignments, all these different things. What I want to do for this specific chart that I want to build, okay, I want to create a burn down rate. So I want to do, the burn down of hours over time. So how would I do that? Well, I've already created some measures, but we're going to talk about what these measures are and what they mean and how you can use them. This is DAX, and that is used to write the functions and equations here. So let's talk about something that's called calculated columns and measures and what the difference is. So for example, under my tasks, I could do a calculated column. So I'm just going to scroll over here to the right. I'm going to say, give me a new column. And this is important to understand when you're working with DAX because you have two types of context that you're going to be working with. You're going to have, there's more context in DAX, but there's filter context and there's row context. And what I mean by that is when we're doing a row context calculation, let's say I wanted this to be the task name with project, right? And so this could be my task name, and then I'm going to concatenate a string, and then I'm going to do my project name, right? So what does this mean? So when I've created this column here, all I've done is concatenate two things. But the point is the idea of row context. When I'm creating a calculated column, it only applies to the row that it is being calculated for, and that's what's row context. So for example here, I have a name of a task, and then I've concatenated the project name with it. And that's only specific for that row of data. But what if I want to do more than that? I mean, that's great that I can do that with one row of data. What if I wanted to calculate something over, a table or something and bring that into my report? Well, that's where measures come into place. So here I can create a measure, and we're going to start by creating some measures. We're going to first create our total plan measure so that we can build our burn rate down. So here on our measure, I just want to go over this just for a minute, just so that we're a little bit familiar with DAX, because this is one of the things you'll want to become familiar with if you're going to really use Power BI and try and build out your own calculations and try and apply your business process. There's a lot you can do out of the box, and if you do your SQL queries right, you can bring it in and not have to do too many calculations. Or maybe you have a SQL Server analysis services cube, either multi-dimensional or tabular. You can bring those in, and those will already have your measures and your calculated fields and your dimensions already defined. But if you wanted to do some analysis on your own, it's good to become familiar with DAX. And this is what I'm not going to go over every single function because that would be very boring. But we're going to go over at least one, just so you can get an idea of what's going on here. Okay, so and if you're familiar with Excel, this looks a lot like an Excel function. The only difference is it's DAX. So here I'm going to do a total, right? I'm doing total planned work. All right, so what's going on here? I have my sum function, I have a calculate table, I have an all, and then I have some columns in here. What's going on is we have what's called filter context. What that means is that when I create a function and I create a set of calculations in here, whatever is being filtered on in the report will apply to this particular function, unless, of course, I use one of the available functions that doesn't apply filter context to it, which ignores it, which is what this all function does. So here's what's happening. I'm saying I want to do a calculate on the table, which is called task phase dataset, and I want you to ignore all of the filters that are on time by day. So return me that that table, the task time phase dataset, ignoring all those filters, and then do a sum of all my task work. So if there are other filters applied, maybe by project name or something, we wouldn't ignore those, but I wanted to ignore by time by day. And then I'm going to do a sum, and that's going to be my total planned work, right? So that's pretty self-explanatory if you're used to Excel functions. It's just kind of work your way out. You can see how it works. There's another one here, and they're all pretty much the same. We're going to calculate a table, we're going to ignore certain filters on it, and then I'm going to filter it after I ignore it, and I'm going to filter it by the time of day, and I'm going to calculate all my work. All right? So here I have these measures. I've defined one for my total planned work. Pull that one up, which is pretty much the one we just went over. I then have my actual to date function, right? And this calculates my actual work to date. I then have my plan to date for calculating my work, all right? And again, all these are doing are ignoring some filters, doing some custom filters after that, and then doing a sum of all the work, all right? And then I have my planned work. Now this is interesting because this is a measure, it's called planned work, and we are actually calling two other measures within a measure. So this just goes to show you how you can use DAX to call other functions within functions. You can also, as of Excel 2016, you also create variables, but that's there's a whole bunch of other functions you can do with Excel 2016. I invite you to go out and learn about DAX. It's a very powerful language. I like using it. It's very simple. But here I have my planned works, which is just my total planned work minus my planned work to date. Okay, so after I have all of these, and then I have one more actual remaining work, which is my total planned minus my actual to date. Okay, so using these measures, I can now create a chart that represents my burn down. So that's actually what I created right here. And it's going to run. There we go. So how did we create this? It was very simple. So just to iterate down here, we have actual remaining work and planned work. So let me recreate that. So we have actual planned work. And if I can get my scroll to work. Come on. Maybe. It will go. And then my time by day. So one of the nice things, I just want to point this out, the Power BI does, is they have this built-in date hierarchy built into each field. So if you're used to working in Excel and you're coming in here from Power Pivot, this time by day field is actually built in with a date hierarchy. So before, in Power Pivot or in SAS, Tabular, or something, we would have to create a date table so that we create a date hierarchy. In this case, Power BI has a feature with it that it already has a date hierarchy built in. In this case, I just want to do my time by day. We can see, and then I want to do this by kind of a burn down chart. And then just for fun, let's throw in some slicers by our project name. Okay, so I have my project that is currently being worked on. I have one that has finished, and I have another one that is currently being worked on. You can see the burn down rates associated with those within Power BI. So using Power BI, let's recap this a little bit. I was able to, using Power Query, connect to the project server data, and this can all be done on-prem as well as in Office 365. I was able to pull in the data that I needed. I could create some calculated columns. I could create some measures that have to do with different variables that I want to calculate and show that have to do with my project. And then I can create a report that has to do with that. So what else could I do with tasks? The other thing I can do with them is I can also connect to SharePoint tasks. So I have another demo that I want to walk you through, and then we can show you how to relate these all together. So here,
you want to take a quick break and answer these?
Oh, yes. Can I integrate my Excel reports directly into Power BI? Just a couple quick questions really quick. Yes, you can actually integrate your Excel reports into Power BI. There's a Power BI plugin, and actually I can pull that up really quick. You'll notice that it's actually loading that publisher right there. I'm just going to, okay, thank you for that. I pull this up here. There's an add-in that you can go out and put in for Excel, and this will allow you to publish, you can pin different documents. If you already have dashboards and things created, you can pin those up to Power BI. Now you can actually use an Excel report as a data source too. So maybe this the dashboard or the report that you have created here in Excel isn't what you really want to show, doesn't have the UI flair to it, and you want to do some more collaboration. You could actually use that Excel file as your data source and publish that up to Power BI. So good question. There's I really like this plugin, this add-in for Excel for Power BI. And then there's one more, can I export the data from my charts? And actually there is a way to do that. So under your options here, whether you're in Power BI Desktop or PowerBI.com, you have the ability to export this data. So just by selecting the visualization that you want to export from, I can click on it and click Export Data, and that will give me a CSV file of the data that went into rendering this visualization. So good questions, very good questions. Let's jump into SharePoint tasks, if there's no other questions. So what if I wanted to bring in my SharePoint tasks into Project Server and combine them with my Project Server data? How could I do that? How could I bring in, how can I access my SharePoint tasks? There is, if I go under Get Data, under Power BI, there is the option to connect directly to a SharePoint list, and we will show that here in just a moment. The one that I first want to show is how to connect to SharePoint tasks using search. This is a little bit more advanced. I'm going to show you it. If you would like more information on how to do this and how I dug into it and reformatted it and did everything to make this work, please contact me. But I'm just going to kind of go over what I did to access the SharePoint tasks using search. So this is Power Query, and if I pull this up here using an OData feed connection, I was able to go out and connect. What I'm going to do here is just kind of copy this URL. I'm going to put it into Notepad so that I can show you a little bit more clearly what this is. So if we do, let me just do a little word wrap here. So for those of you who aren't familiar maybe with SharePoint, SharePoint has a search API. It has a really good, awesome search functionality. But under the search API, they actually, just like the project server API, they have RESTful services you can query, you know, built for client-side object model if you want to do custom application development or different things, or even if you wanted to use it in other web parts. But you can also use it in Power BI. So here I just have a simple SharePoint search query, and this actually goes and searches for tasks all across my entire farm, or in this case, my tenant for Office 365, and brings in all the tasks that I have access to. Now, there is a little bit of a gotcha to this. There's only, it only allows to bring back 500. So if you have a lot of tasks across a lot of sites that you have access to, you might want to create some filters so that you can filter this down. You also want to be aware of this because as you're going to update this in Power BI, there's also the limits that Microsoft has on your licensing, how much data you can store and how much you can pull in. So just, you know, a little heads up with that, there is a little bit of a gotcha with it, and keep in mind your licensing with Power BI and only bring back what you need. But just for the sake of this demo, what I'm doing is I'm going out and I'm bringing in the content type that has to do with tasks. I'm saying I want my task status to not be completed, and I'm going to include all these properties that go in with which are just fields and metadata that go with those tasks. Okay, so once I do that, Power BI sends this back to me. So what's really going on here? What's going on is we are returning either an XML or JSON object. And this is fun if you like to work with JSON, if you like to work with JavaScript and XML. It requires a little bit of massaging to get it into a table so that you can see the data. So basically what I'm not going to go through every single step here because there's a little bit to it, a little bit of explanation going on here. But what I'm doing is I'm drilling down into this JSON object. And I'm going down just to the data set that I need because search returns a whole bunch of information. And I'm doing some converting it to a table instead of being in a JSON object or XML. I'm expanding some values so that each of my rows in my table has a record with it. I'm expanding those values. I'm drilling in. So here, when you start working with Power Query and pulling in data, this is a drill down option. These little two arrows here it means you can expand that, and there's sub items within it. So I'm going to add an index to this. Then I'm going to reorder it by that index. I'm going to group it by that, so I create a table. Basically, what I'm trying to do is, as I'm drilling down into this search result set, it's Microsoft returns it as a key value pair in which I have the value, and then I have the column, and each of those are in text field. So as I drill down here, what you'll notice is for each item that is returned, I have a value and I have a key, but these should actually be my table headers. So using Power Query, I'm able to transform this using the pivot transformation. And by calling on the pivot transformation, I now have taken this XML and JSON data that is returned from search and created a table out of it that I can now create a nice looking report through Power BI. And if you notice here, I have all my functions, I have my documents, I have the path that it came from, the web server URL, who it's assigned to, just have all my data. And I can go through this and I can remove any columns that I don't want. Right? So if I don't want to show this one and I don't want to show any other one, right? I can go through and now manipulate this as a data set. So using Power Query, I'm able to convert XML, JSON into an actual data set that we're familiar with, like when we use it with Excel or with SQL Server. Then I can take a report off of that. What if I just wanted to connect to a SharePoint list? Here I've done that, and it's actually pretty simple. If you just go to New Source, you can just point it to a SharePoint list. So this could be to a SharePoint on-premise 2013 list. This could be to Office 365, anywhere that you have your data stored. I just happen to point this one to a tasks list. One feature that I do want to point out, since we're talking about tasks, is in Office 365. I can't get to that. Let me. When you create a new, like for example, a team site, there will be this little icon right here. I really like this feature. So if you are working on a deadline, okay, this is on a team site template, you can click working on a deadline, and it will actually create for you a calendar and a tasks list with the Gantt chart view already up here. So this will give you, if you're used to working with Project Server and you want to modify this, this gives you a quick project summary. Oops, wrong link. Of your tasks. It creates a calendar so that your teams can come in and work on it, and it actually creates a really nice way for you to connect to using Power BI as well. So I just want to point this out because I really like this feature. But let me jump back to Power BI. So here in Power BI, I have pulled in some task data that has to do with this from this site. I'm going to remove this column. You can see that I have the assigned to individual, I have the due date, percent complete, status, created. So there's not as many fields, obviously, as coming from Project Server, but I can still do some interesting things with this. So let me click close and apply. And it is going to take just a moment to go through. And I want to come in here and click on my data set view, because I want to point out a few things that are important to understand. When you are working with ZAACT and Power Pivot, or now in Power BI in the data modeling, it's good to always make sure your columns have the right data types. Sometimes they come in, especially as I've been working with SharePoint lists, your columns aren't always in the data type you need them to be. So here I had to come in here, select this column, come up to the modeling tab, select on date time, and I could select which data type it is. And this is important because if we're going to do any date calculations, if it's not the date time format, you can run into different errors. Okay, if we're going to do a percent complete, we want this to be in a decimal. And again, this is another date here. We can also categorize them and format them how we want. So I just want to point out that using this data model, we need to always make sure to keep our columns with the correct data type. So what can I do here? I could do a task by status. So how did I create this? Let me just close these, and we will recreate that. So I happen to create a new measure. Now that we're all familiar with measures, here I have just a simple count, right? So this does count rows of my SharePoint task list. Now, to emphasize again this idea of filter context, okay, count rows is going to say, give me the total rows in the SharePoint list. Well, that doesn't help me much if, I can select here, oops, and it'll tell me there's 11 items, right? So this emphasizes again the idea of filter context. I have to start applying filters to things in order to start seeing the values changing. So I can now select a status. Let's select here, let's select my status, not started, not completed. All right, and I want to put a slicer in for the person that it's assigned to. And then I also want to do, let's just show the due date here as a text field. And I want to just show the date itself and not the date hierarchy for drill down purposes. So now what I have the ability to do is filter these. I can see the due dates on here. I can click on not started. It filters those even more. My in progress and completed. So just pulling in a SharePoint list, I'm able to find the total tasks that I have that haven't been started, that have been completed, that are in progress. I can see when those tasks are due. Just using what Power BI gives me and SharePoint lists, I'm able to create some task monitoring capabilities just using Power BI. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to now turn it over to a question and answer. We're going to do Q&A now. If anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask about task management, to kind of review what we talked about today. We talked about how you can use the Power BI content pack for Project Server. You can pull in data about your PWA site in either SharePoint Online. For SharePoint Online, you can connect to your PWA data using the Project API and RESTful services for on-premise data. You can also, and then pull those in and create measures that you can do any kind of calculation you want off of your project data. Then we talked about pulling in SharePoint data that we can connect to tasks, we can connect to search, and using those data sources, we can build out our own measures that we can create some task management capabilities. So a little bit of an overview, and we're going to turn this over now to Q&A since we only have about 10 minutes left. And if anybody has any questions, you can feel free to put them up there. We had somebody asking what is the best way to learn DAX. So there are actually several. Microsoft has it very, for all the functions for DAX, they are pretty well documented. I'm just going to pull up one here. This is the calculate table function. If you'd like to read through documentation, of course, on functions, there you go. You can go into MSDN. But there are several good books out there by several authors. There are also some good blogs. If you go to if you search for Power Pivot on anything on Power Pivot and DAX or Analysis Services Tabular, there are several blogs out there from people who work for Microsoft to MVPs that you can follow and learn. They have several examples out there online on how to use different things like date, time, functions, and filtering across different slicers and things.
What's your favorite Power BI project you've worked on?
So a favorite Power BI a favorite Power BI visualization or project. So there's one that is using R that you can use R scripting language. That's something we haven't talked about here, but for those of you who are into data science, you can actually incorporate your own R scripts. That is one of the features that I really liked, that you can actually integrate machine learning into, and using your R scripts, you can connect to Azure ML, and you can report on that in Power BI. And using your models for predictive analytics, you can bring those in. It's one of the features I like the most about Power BI is just the way that it incorporates with all of the Microsoft products and Azure, HD Insight, Azure ML, using R. And there's also a new feature in SQL Server 2016 where you can pin your SSRS reports up to Power BI in the cloud. So, well, are there any more questions? Doesn't look like there is. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We hope you learned something about Power BI. If you have more questions or want to learn more about what it can do for you, please let us know. And have a good day.